If you ignore the hat, it's just a winter cat sweater and is totally appropriate for January. Oh, and also ignore the Merry Christmas bit. Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be my January wrap-up. First, let's go to Past Me to see what I read in the first 10 days of the month. So I have a couple of books to give back to the library I'd like to review. One of those is Snow and Rose, which I just finished this morning. It is by Emily Winfield Martin, and it was recommended to me by Kara of Wild Book Garden, and I really liked it. It has got lovely illustrations. Where's my favorite? This is one of my favorites. You got a couple of girls riding on a bear, and so it was apparently originally a Brothers Grimm tale, and it is about two girls who suddenly become poor from being nobles when their father disappears because he was the one from the noble line and he has no male heir among his children. It had to go like a cousin or something, and they go to live in the woods, which is a little bit reminiscent of Beauty and the Beast original stories, so that's interesting. Fortunately though, these girls do get to keep their mother, unlike a lot of middle grade children, and their mother is kind, competent, and attentive too. So it's all about these girls going out into the woods around their house and finding all sorts of magical things. Mostly really nice magical things that don't cause them any trouble and are like little boys who live under the ground and grow mushrooms, and cool animals. So it's a lot of fun and very much the sort of thing I could see reading to a kid, where you can read a little bit of it and then be done for the day, because they have kind of like little snippets of stories in each chapter. And so the plot felt like it was moving very slowly. It kind of was, but part of that is because there's a lot of things building that you don't know are a big deal. It seems like they're a small deal, but they will be much more important later on, and I really like that. There's also, of course, a lot about sisterhood and taking care of each other and differences between siblings and how that can be a strength instead of having to be a point of discord. And it had a bit of a creepy vibe at moments in the first half, where it would allude to there being something creepy, but I didn't get creeped out until there's a certain magical creature who goes directly from not scary at all to very scary very quickly, and that was also interesting. Overall, I really enjoyed this and I highly recommend it. I enjoyed reading it just normally like I do, but I think this would also be really good for reading aloud to someone else. So then we have Freaks Like Us by Susan Vaught, who is a psychologist, and this is about a kid with schizophrenia and a kid with ADHD and a kid with selective mutism. And this is not own voices, but it seems very well researched, and it definitely portrays these people who have neurodivergencies and mental illnesses as people with their brains telling them funky things and not as other. And it also really highlights the difficulties that come with the stigmatization of neurodivergence and mental illness, and how people with these things are ignored when they say that something is wrong, and not believed when they say that they didn't do something. So it is about the girl with selective mutism suddenly disappearing, and the FBI coming into town, and her two friends, Jason with schizophrenia and Derek with ADHD, are at the center of the investigation, basically because they were the last people to see her, combined with the stigma against them. And it's all about this kid being very upset because his friend is gone, and also because all these people think he did it, and trying to get them to actually find her, and all about how his schizophrenia manifests, and the voices he hears, and the hallucinations he sees, which for me helped a lot if this is accurate, which I would hope it would be, her being a psychologist. As I and a lot of neurodivergent and mentally ill people know, there are a lot of psychologists who don't know what they're talking about. I haven't heard any bad things about the rep in this. The boy with ADHD, I know more about ADHD, so that seemed fairly accurate to me from my research. But schizophrenia is something that I understand a lot less. This helped me wrap my brain around it a lot more, and also was a lot less othering than the rep that I've seen in TV shows and movies. Usually the rep in those is very negative. So it was really interesting and nice to hear this much more positive perspective, especially because I'm fairly certain that everyone with schizophrenia, the voices that they hear tell them different things from everyone else, and it's all different for everybody. But in this case, this kid's voices pretty much tell him the things that my brain tells me all the time. I don't hear audible voices, and he does, so there's a difference, but it's basically just a bunch of self-loathing stuff, the standard stuff that people with depression and anxiety's brains tell them. So that was very relatable. The hallucinations sound horrendously unpleasant, but once again it seemed like they were talked about in a very sensitive way, but also a very matter-of-fact way, and the way that Jason and Derek talk to each other about their different symptoms and characteristics reminded me a lot of how neurodivergent people I know talk to each other, and I really like that. The relationship between Jason and Derek seemed very real. There's a really good little bit of dialogue where Jason asks Derek, "Do you feel real?" And Derek gives him the side eye and says, "Are you sure you're gonna make it a couple days without your meds, man?" The darkest of the stuff is definitely talked around instead of like explicitly stated or graphically described, so that was nice. There is a beating that is graphically described from bullies, and the hallucinations are graphically described, and the voices, so do be aware of that going in. But overall I really love this. I did skip to the end to make sure it ended in a way that satisfied me, because I don't trust thriller writers, and I think this is what the genre would be, but I was satisfied with it, so I went back and read the rest. Then we have A River of Royal Blood, which was overdue, so it's already gone back to the library, and this was a very hyped up book, but it actually pretty much lived up to the hype. Yes, Frodo. Frodo's my most chatty cat. He really likes to tell me how his day is going. The world building was really cool. I liked the different species and all of the political backgrounds that we got, and it was told about in a very understandable way that made sense for the main character learning about it, and it was never too info dumpy at any one time. I really liked the main character. She did some less than well thought out things sometimes, but considering her point of view that she felt fairly certain she was going to lose the inevitable duel between her and her sister to the death to take the throne over from her mother when they come of age, which is very soon to when this book is set, that's kind of understandable. She was kind of having one of those might as well have fun before I die type attitudes. I really liked the magic system that was heavily linked to tattoos, but also to ancestry, and I liked getting to meet all these different characters with different motivations and different backgrounds. Sometimes when that happens, it gets too complicated for me, or I don't like any of the people because they're all out for their own good. But in this case, I really liked all of the motivations. They made sense and they were different for everybody. There are a lot of really good platonic relationships, like between our main character, Ava, and the woman who raised her, who is now her spy master, and also her gay best friend who does not suit that stereotype, which is nice. And the new mentor that she finds, I thought was going to be a really gross, tropey romance, and it turned out to be not that, so I really appreciated that. And it says in the description that on Goodreads and where it's sold, the official description, that it is inspired by North Africa, but several North Africans have reviewed it and said that it's not. So if you are looking for North African inspired fantasy, maybe read the reviews first. But I really liked the clothing that was described. It was described in quite a lot of detail, and it was like good detail where it was interesting. It wasn't, it didn't go on too long, and the designs were cool enough that it was fun to read. And yeah, it was really good. Looking forward to the sequel. And the last book I have already read is The Oracle Code, which is a graphic novel set in the DC universe in Gotham City, featuring a disabled protagonist who became disabled because she was shot in the back. And it is about her moving to this recovery place that sounds good in a lot of ways, like it's mostly for rehab, physical rehab, and teaching people how to use their wheelchairs or their crutches depending on what they need. But the director there says he wants to fix the people with their disabilities, and yeah, that word is used very specifically a couple of times, which is foreshadowing, but also super ableist. And the main character calls this out, but like it felt very discordant with what the place was supposed to be, and that should have been a massive red flag of where not to send your daughter for rehab. But the dad's kind of ableist too and doesn't know anything, so But our main character meets a couple of other girls who are there who are really great and starts forming friendships, and then someone goes missing, and then another someone goes missing, and she needs to investigate. Also, she's a hacker, and that's why Oracle code is a thing. But for me personally, I thought there should have been a lot more hacking, considering she was a hacker. She solved a lot of her problems by methods other than hacking, and I would have liked to see more of the hacking. Also, heavy use of the puzzle piece. There were puzzle pieces all over, like every time there was like a break or a time passing scene transition, there was a bunch of puzzle pieces, and it was somewhat thematically along the lines of this girl likes to do puzzles, and she considers her hacking a putting puzzle pieces together thing, and that's like how her investigation of people who are missing is like putting together a puzzle. But it just reminded me of how sensitive autistic people are about puzzle pieces, and they're definitely not used in that context where the disabled people here are puzzle pieces that have to be like put into a certain thing to make sense. But that was just really interesting that was a huge thematic image of this book. Say hi to future me. So after I finished reading those books, I started reading these books, which, as I said in my Valentine's TBR video, I didn't intend to read all at once before Valentine's started, but I did because I love them so very much. I told you the plot idea for the beginning back when I got these in a haul. Basically, it is about a herbalist who runs away from her home country because she is being harassed by that country's prince, runs into the prince from the neighboring country who saves her, and they hit it off really well, so she wants to then become the herbalist for his castle so that she can both hang out with him and do her favorite thing for a job. Her name is Shirayuki. She inspired me to make a video about the way that Latin letters have been assigned to Japanese sounds. So that's a super nerdy video that's probably gonna come out in February sometime. But I thought about it because Shirayuki and other people from this book series, such as Mitsuhide, this guy, have weirdly easy for me to pronounce names, considering they are not in any way related to the Romance languages. Kiki is this girl's name, and that's very easy no matter where you're from, probably. This is Zen, which is also pretty easy. But anyway, with all of these, we get past the first arc about her settling into the palace and getting this job and figuring out how to interact with nobles, and also dealing with her prince who had been harassing her and his character development, and into the second arc, which is a bit more of that, but also dealing with some pirate gangs who like to kidnap people. And now the last couple of books, 10 and 11, have been in another arc about the furthering of the romance between Zen and Shirayuki, and we're also learning more about the country that they are now in and different politics that go on in their country, and also traveling around and seeing different plants that grow in different parts of our country, and different health systems and different ways of studying plants, because a big focus of the series continues to be Shirayuki's work as an herbalist, which I really, really enjoy. And this is Obi, and I love him too. And it's not often that I love the entire main cast of a book series this much, but all of those ones that I've just named for you, I am very attached to, and I really love all the different ways their character arcs are going. Plus, it is shoujo manga, which means it's aimed at teenage girls, so there's lots of really prettiness in the illustrations and flower petals everywhere for no reason. And I really like that too. Oh, and another cool thing about manga that I didn't know until I started reading it is that you get sidebars, which are a thing when the illustrator just has a more squashed illustrating section and they put a sidebar where it's them talking to you personally. I don't think there's any spoilers on these pages. It's really cool because it's a really nice way to connect with the author illustrator and get to know them as a person. So a lot of times the illustrator will draw themselves. Is this a spoiler? Nah. Will draw a chibi version of themselves, and sometimes it looks more like a human being, but this particular one really doesn't. This is Sarata Akiduki's illustration of herself, and it's like a little, what are those things in Zelda? Anyway, the little tree people, it looks kind of like that, and here she's sitting on a pile of pillows that represents all the volumes of this series that she's written, and it's freaking cute! Then around the same time, I was reading Lovesick Braves, which is the second book in the Crooked Rock series by Pamela Sanderson, who is a citizen of the Karuk tribe. This says she's an urban Indian living in the Pacific Northwest. And this is about the Crooked Rock Urban Indian Center, which is a center mainly funded by various different tribal councils, but it is for they refer to themselves as Indians who are living in the city, because there are people from a bunch of different tribes and it talks about how they don't really get to have much of a tribal connection because they feel very isolated in the city because they don't have their own tribe, and it's hard to find other indigenous people to hang out with. So this is to kind of help them get together and find community, and it's also to help them with various services like transportation, finding job help, senior assistance, that kind of thing. It is also a romance, where there was one romance in the last book where I really didn't like the hero, but in this one, both our people are very sweet and nice and don't have that specific problem I had with the last hero, and so I like them quite a bit. You might notice these are white people on the cover. The author actually addresses that in the back of the book, and she says it's because it's really hard to find stock photos of Native American people. Personally, I would have thought the solution to that would be to hire a cartoonist, because that's like a very popular thing to do with romance books right now. So like it would fit the genre and then you could have them look any way you want. But maybe she had a acquaintance that does this style of covers, so she wanted to hire them, or it turned out to be too expensive to do it the other way. The main flaw with this book, in my opinion, is that it has 4 different perspective characters instead of just the 2, which is traditional for romance books, because we are also getting perspectives of this girl's boss and her boss, who have kind of a romantic thing, but this isn't their story, and it's mostly about how difficult it is to try to run this center and get anything going when they have very little funding, don't really have any experts in the field of social services. But that's something I think would be better told rather than shown, because showing all the things that frustrate the characters just ends up making the reader frustrated, which isn't a pleasant reading experience. And also, I think it would be better to just learn about those 2 characters in their own romance book rather than them horning in on these people's story. But it is really nice to have a relatively happy, romance-oriented story about Indigenous people, because publishing prefers to publish a lot of darker stuff. Unhappy stories are sometimes the stories that publishers prefer for Indigenous people, also other BIPOC people, but they don't seem to want to publish a lot of happy stories, which is probably why these books are indie published. I've mentioned before, I really don't like the publishing industry as a whole. There's a lot of racism and sexism and general capitalism fuel nonsense going on in it, so I am really happy to support indie authors when I can. So even though this isn't the perfect romance for me, I liked it quite a bit, and I am planning on reading the next book, and I'm not sure if that one's out or not, because this one was better than the last, and sometimes if the sequel is better than the first book, the third book will be even better because the author keeps getting better at writing. So I'm hoping that that will happen for this series as well. Then we have House of Gold, which I'm not technically finished with, but I skipped to the end to make sure I still like the ending, and I do, to make sure that I could recommend it as fully as I want to. So this I picked up because Kara of Wild Book Garden said it was one of the books that made her realize she liked the arranged marriage trope, and so that's one of my favorite tropes, so I decided I will check that out. I usually like books that Kara recommends, and so I did really like it. It is about a big Jewish family called the Goldbaums who run a bunch of banks in Europe, and it's set in the early 1900s, from like 1910 to 1918 about, so right leading up to and through the First World War. And this family spans across Europe, and so do their banks, and so the World War has a big effect on them. It separates them and slaps down borders where the borders were very easily crossable up until then for a while. And it is about that and the whole family, while also being specifically about this woman and the Goldbaum man that she marries, because they all marry people with the same last name, which I'm not sure how they got to be a huge family in the first place without marrying other people. Like, they don't even talk about marrying other Jewish people, like it's just Goldbaums, so they must not have done that at some point, because otherwise their family wouldn't have been able to grow, unless a bunch of unrelated people started out being named Goldbaum. But anyway, you can marry your like second cousin that's like deemed appropriate, and so these two second cousins are stuck together basically because they're the right age and because they want to strengthen ties between Austria, Germany, where she is from, and England, where he lives. And I really, really love their dynamic. It starts out really iffy because she is very much a rule breaker and doesn't care what people think, and he is very much a rule follower and very much does care what people think, but he is actually willing to be good to her and give her her own choices, even though that will make people think something's wrong with her and him by extension, and how they grow together through figuring that out is really, really nice to me. And this is a super slow book, but I love the characters so much that I didn't mind. I just got to spend lots of time with them. Now a super slow book that I really hated. I read this book for a book club. And that's why I didn't just DNF it, because I wanted to join in on the conversation, and I gave it an extra long time to try to get to me because my aunt who started the book club really liked it. But right off the bat, it's by a man. You know, I have a thing, a little bit of misandry, a little bit of a problem with male authors because I've been burned before. Also, it's a whodunit, which is a slightly different thing from just a regular mystery novel sometimes, because a lot of the point is to have the reader look at all the same clues that the character is and try to figure it out alongside, whereas some mysteries that's less so the point. It's called Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. At first it was just boring and unenjoyable because the characters are unlikable, and it's set in a small English town where a private detective goes to investigate a murder of a person I don't like and don't care about, and all the people are, sorry, but nasty small town English people who judge each other and gossip about each other all the time. Also, apparently, UK people are really nasty to Germans, even Jewish Germans. All those things were negatives, but I would have lived with it. But there's a really bad ableism in here, basically, where a character in this is a book within a book, so a character within the inner book is autistic coded, which is a lot like being queer coded but for autism, and it's shown as a really negative thing, and you should consider this person shifty and suspicious because they're neurodivergent, and it was never addressed. And the main character in the second book, the outer book, was super ableist towards this character when she was trying to figure out who had done the murder in the inner book. So I hated that so much. I could not like that character after that, the character who's ableist. And I've written a lot about this in my Storygraph review, so I'll just link that for you. But anyway, hated it. Fortunately, I wrote that review on the day of the book club, so I got out all my anger at that and didn't have to blow up at my fellow book club people. Then we have The Space Between Worlds, which is wonderful. It was brought to my attention by Starla of Starla Reads, and I should read more of the books that she recommends because I don't think I've ever disliked a book that I got from her channel. This is really cool looking. It's crubby, post-apocalyptic looking city on this side with our main character, and it's a fancy high-tech sci-fi city on this side with her love interest, and these cities are right next to each other but very separate because racism mostly. It's talked about how most of the people in this city are brown and black, and most of the people in this city are white, and these people have money and these people do not, and these people are ruled by gang lords, and these people are ruled by democratic government, maybe? That part's not actually talked about that much, but capitalism, all over this capitalism. And this is both about the space between worlds where there is technology in this world to travel between alternate realities, and you can only go to an alternate reality if you are dead in that reality, because reality will be like, there's two of you, die. So these people grab these people to send them into other worlds, because with these people being poor and in a violent place without good health care, a lot of them are dead in various alternate realities. And so there's the space when you're traveling between alternate realities, and there's also the space between this world and this world, because they're very different despite being right next to each other. And I was very unsure about the romance when there's a big section in the middle where they didn't see each other or have anything to do with each other. So it was kind of funky how it was organized. There were kind of different parts where she was spending time in some alternate realities longer than others, but in the end I really liked it. And something I really liked about this is a lot of times when there are plot twists and heavy world building and a lot of stuff going on that's partially revealed and you don't know everything at the start, the plot twists either come out of nowhere or are totally predictable. Whereas in this one, I was given enough information to have questions like, why is this like this? And this doesn't quite fit with this. And then when the further information came, it was like, aha, that makes sense. And it answers my question. So it was really nice for my brain to be so simpatico with this book. And the romance was also really cute and complicated, and I loved it a lot. I don't really like alternate reality stories because the idea of alternate realities freaks me out. But in this one, we mostly just talk about the 380 so alternate realities. They're very close to this one because those are the only ones that can be traveled to. So it feels a lot less infinite, and I don't like infinity. So it was a lot more comfortable than some alternate reality stories are. Okay, now I have to look at my reading journal because I've drawn out all the book covers. This is my finished January reads book list thing, and several of these have had to go back to the library or ebooks or audiobooks. So one I haven't talked about yet is How Long Till Black Future Month. This is a bunch of short stories by N.K. Jemisin, who's a really good author. I particularly like her prose, and sometimes her stories are too sad for me, but her writing tends to be very lyrical and just enjoyable in a pleases my ears kind of way. And various people have highly recommended this book, so I tried it out and I really liked it. It was once again very lyrical, and it was an audiobook, so that was particularly enjoyable. Her books also tend to contain a bit more sex than I like in my fantasy books. I prefer to have that, you know, stuck in my romance books where I can like skip it because it's unimportant to the plot and where I'm expecting it. And there were a few short stories like that, but there was just a lot of really interesting ideas, and they were all very different from each other. There was some time travel stuff, there was some steampunky stuff, there was some alternate history, some space opera, and I was able to connect with pretty much all of the characters despite the shortness of the stories, and that was really nice. And also the foreword that she had at the beginning about her writing journey and how difficult it was to get published as a Black woman, and just about kind of her love of writing made me cry. So that was a great start. So I highly recommend that. It gives a lot of variety of Afrofuturism. So if you like to kind of explore that and figure out what types you like, this might be a good taste tester. Wednesdays in the Tower is the sequel to Tuesdays in the Castle. So it's about this shape-shifting castle that pops rooms out of nowhere and also occasionally pops creatures out of nowhere, in this case an egg that our main character Ceci starts taking care of, and it hatches, and then she takes care of the magical creature that pops out of it. And she has really cool relationships with her siblings, and also this visiting prince who has a bunch of yappy dogs who is adorable. It was really interesting to see more exploration of the castle's magic and where it came from. So we're learning a lot about that, and this one ended on a cliffhanger, so now I have to read the next one. Kingdom of Copper was super long. Hard to boil down my thoughts on it. Dara is still irritating. More irritating than he was in the first book, actually. Lots of developments for our characters, lots of time passing. I was rooting the most for Ali and quite a bit for Nari, and I was very confused up until the end about where is all of this going to go. There's a lot of tensions and a lot of things building together, and I don't know how they're going to be resolved. S.A. Chakraborty took a nice long time to do the ending, which I appreciated because there was a lot that needed to get done, but it was a bit slow in the middle leading up to that. I don't think it needed to be quite as long. We kind of got the point of where things were going without all the details. Akata Warrior. I didn't like Akata Witch all that much when I listened to the audiobook like a year ago, but when I read Akata Warrior, I loved it. I think there's less frustrating stuff in this book because we're not just getting introduced. Jaguar? No. Panther? No. To the magical society and the characters, which I think might have irritated me in the first book. I'm not sure, but it just wasn't totally for me. But this second book, I loved the magic system and I loved the characters, all except Chi-Chi, who annoys me to death because she purposefully has created her lone love triangle on purpose. Why did she do that? Why does she keep encouraging these boys to fight? You got some problems there, Chi-Chi. What the heck? But I really liked getting to know Sunny and Orlu better and their relationship. Sasha is great as long as he's not hanging out with Chi-Chi, and I really liked getting to see more of Sunny's teacher, mentor, patron person, and also exploring the world more and meeting some interesting magical creatures. Also, Akata Warrior is a good descriptor. She got to do some warrior stuff in this one, and I like that a lot. This one just grabbed me a lot more, and definitely part of it is the relationship between Sunny and Orlu. It reminds me a lot of some of my favorite fictional relationships, and I'm really glad I didn't give up on this series. Also, at the end, it seemed like it was setting up for another book plot, but I thought this was just a duology, but maybe it's going to be like a companion duology, or maybe you're just supposed to imagine what happens. I don't know. Anyway, my favorite book that I read this month, I think, although the Space Between Worlds is definitely up there, is No Man of Woman Born. This is a collection of trans stories. Trans men, trans women, non-binary, genderqueer, lots of different trans identities are the authors of these stories, and also the features, characters of these stories. And I just love them so much. Like, usually in a short story collection, I'll like not all of them. I might even only like a few of them, but I liked every single one of these stories. The world building was on point. The originality of the fairy tale and legend retellings was creative and different, and the characters were all well developed and interesting, and plus there was all that variety of different gender identities that each had their own way of fitting in with prophecies, because the main topic of this book is No Man of Woman Born is a phrase that was in some famous book that I have known but I have deleted from my brain, and it was a prophecy that no man or woman born can kill this person. Hello, Arwen. You can't, there's their tail. Arwen's on my lap. Hi. And so in that story, a person who had been born via C-section was the person who could kill the bad guy. But Tolkien obviously twisted that and had it be Eowyn, who's not a man, killed the Witch King because no man could kill him. And in this one, that is referenced at the beginning, so it's cool that the editor is a Tolkien fan who liked that. And in this one, various gendered prophecies are twisted in all sorts of different ways, unique to each identity. And there's also a lot of Celtic mythology inspiring these, so I like that too. And I might have to buy this book because it's back at the library now, and I really want to use a bunch of these stories for discussions about handling gender and prophecies and storytelling, because it's really interesting. I think that's everything. So I also have this where I've been keeping hash marks. I've read 8 books that I own, all of which were those manga I showed you. 9 physical books from the library, 1 ebook, and 3 audiobooks. So that is all that I read in January. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to leave an emoji, how about a snowflake? And I will see you in the next video. Bye!
Frodo says, your video is going to be about me today, right? Yeah. Yeah. I would love to make a video about you, but you don't usually like the camera. Yeah, you stop doing whatever cute thing you're doing whenever the camera comes out, don't you?